I was watching reruns of the old sitcom, Sanford and Son, one of my all-time favorites, by the way. It's a classic. Fred, the father, coming from downstairs inside of his home, called out to his son, "Are you down here, dummy?" And his son, Lamont, answered, "Did you call me, Pop?" And then I was listening to one of my favorite Kirk Franklin songs. And one of the lines in that song says, "Everybody's got a title, but do you know your name?" Ladies and gentlemen, what have you been preconditioned to believe about yourself? And are you preconditioned to answer to a name that is inferior to your calling? Before you can gravitate towards your purpose and walk in the designer's shoes of destiny, you must first know your name. Because chances are, if you don't, you'll be just like Lamont. You'll answer to anything and will live out an inferior life. When I was in first grade, I remember my teacher instructing the class to write our name and date of birth on construction paper. I struggled to write my name, but I got through it with the help of my teacher. But then it came time to write my birthday, and I couldn't. Looking around the room, however, it became abundantly clear that the other children could. And of course, I did what any other 6-year-old would do in such a situation. I started crying. The teacher came over to me and asked what was wrong, and I responded, "I don't know when I was born." The class erupted into laughter, and I felt hurt and embarrassed. The teacher responded, "Oh, don't cry. Of course you do. Everyone knows the date they were born, silly." The truth of the matter is I didn't. You see, my mother changed the date not once, not twice, but 3 times. Yes, 3 times. Initially, I was born on August 3rd, then August 30th, and later it became August 31st. So there, my 6-year-old self sat confused about the date I was born. Talk about having an inferiority complex. I mean, the person who gave birth to you and all those around you who were there at your birth couldn't remember the most important date of your life. It was depressing. I mean, was I an alien? And so later, as a teenager, I decided to go along with August 31st. Why? Because I grew more and more ashamed of having to explain to people that I was clueless about the day I was born. When people would ask me, "When is your birthday?" It wasn't until I was 17 years old that I discovered the truth after applying for a copy of my birth certificate at the Aiken County Health Clinic. Not only did my birth certificate not name the father, who I still know nothing of, but it had my birth date listed as August 28th. Not a 3 anywhere. Well, at least you got the year right. A surge of emotions hit me all at once, and I left that clinic in tears, feeling good on one hand because I finally knew the truth, but on the other hand, hurt and sad. Why was I so forgettable? Why the confusion? All of my life, at this point, I had been answering to birth dates that were inferior. Inferior because none of them belonged to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to ask you the question: is your self-ignorance causing you to answer to a name, to a life, to a circumstance that is inferior to your calling? During my first couple of years in college, I struggled with my identity, go figure that one, and with my grades. I felt that I didn't belong in anyone's classroom, and I certainly didn't belong in a college one. You see, no other Hollingsworth in my family had ever gone to college. In fact, historically, we're riddled with addiction, illiteracy, and severe dysfunction. So I felt inferior because of where I came from. And because I felt inferior, I answered to all things inferior. But I made a deal with myself early on. However, that if I was going to fail, it would have to be in the classroom. Because I wasn't going back out there in the world and sit on the sidelines. Oh no, I had been sitting long enough. I was going to fail until I figured out how to win. And I was going to conquer my way upstream somehow. Some days I walked through those college doors with tears in my eyes because internally there was a constant war going on between my head and my heart. You see, my heart yearned for more, but my mind yearned to give up. As it told me that I wasn't smart enough, that I had no right to be there. I failed my way all through grade school and middle school, then dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. Who was I, Sharon Hollingsworth, to think I could make it in college? It told me that I was just fooling myself to think I could do this. Oftentimes, I would have to take myself aside and say to myself, shut up. This is what you have to do sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. When the voices of doubt and negativity seeps through your mind. But I stayed. I showed up every day. Because I was not going to give up. I made giving up not an option. In fact, because of this inside struggle, I decided one day that I was going to go and speak to the school psychologist. And after 3 weeks, she kicked me out of her sessions. And she said to me, in one of my boohooing sessions, she said, Sharon, you do not need me. She said, you already know what you're capable of. You showed up here because, yes, you are struggling with where you came from versus who you are striving to become. I have faith in you. I have students who really need to sit in my sessions. You are not one of them. So you can come by to visit, but you cannot come and stay. So on one hand, in that situation, I felt a little rejected. But then as I thought about it, I felt good about myself because I was able to connect with someone who saw something in me that I was yet unable to see in myself. I was capable. In fact, I was more than capable. And that's what she saw in me. So, ladies and gentlemen, I took giving up off the table. You couldn't even have the conversation with me about giving up. And believe me, people tried. I started college with 4 or 5 other people that I had known. We were all single parents struggling. We all entered college around the same time. In fact, it was 5 of us. And 3 of us dropped out. And 2 of us stayed. So the ones who dropped out, they were relentless in their efforts to get me to do the same whenever I would convey my struggles, my challenges, my feelings. Not with the intention of giving up, but just venting. And they would try to convince me to give up. Just go get a job. Maybe college is not for you. I know it's not for me. I tried it. I didn't like it, or I tried it and I failed. So it's not for me. But I said to them, you can't even have this conversation with me about giving up. It's a non-option. So I stopped venting to those people. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I took it completely off the table. And that's what you have to do in times when you feel like giving up on whatever it is that you are seeking to accomplish. When your inferior self speaks to you, tell it to shut up, to stand down. It does not get a vote in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, I refuse, in fact, I refuse to allow fear to cage me. So I encourage you to do likewise. We weren't inferior. We are not less than. Don't answer to inferiority like I initially did, or like Lamont. Change what you demand for yourself and what you demand from others, and do so without apology. Years ago, ladies and gentlemen, I was facilitating a workshop. And in one of my classes, we were working on a subject titled, "Who Am I Really?" And one of my former clients from that workshop came to my office one day, about 2 weeks later, after being beaten by her husband. And she said to me, as he held me down against the wall by my throat with one hand while punching me with the other, he yelled, "Who in the," using the F word, "do you think you are?" She said inside of herself, she was screaming out in response, "I don't know who I am, but I wish to hell that somebody would tell me." How many of us, ladies and gentlemen, have searched for validation from someone else, wanting and needing for someone else to tell us who we are? Look for validation from no one, for God has already validated you at your conception. You are important because you exist. No one need to tell you that. Staring out in the distance, telling me this story with tears in her bruised eyes and with a busted lip, she suddenly turned to me with a look of bewilderment and said in a still, small voice, "Damn, Miss Hollingsworth, I don't know who I am. I'm a full-grown woman and I don't know who I am. I'm somebody's mother and I don't know who I am." I caught chills throughout my entire being. And there for a moment, we both sat in silence. It was such a profound moment. And I needed for her to soak up those words because within them laid her freedom. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this revelation was consistent with the question that I had been asking the class to ponder, a question to awake their consciousness. And there sat this young woman, awakened to the realization that she was a stranger to herself. You see, ladies and gentlemen, 4 precious sons were given to these 2 parents to nurture and to lead. But how could they lead their sons into the arms of their unique and divine destinies when they themselves could not find their way out of their own wilderness? As a single teen parent, I was also in my own wilderness and was also incapable of leading my daughter. So in that moment, we now shared a mutual understanding of what being lost felt like while we were supposed to be leading. I told this young lady that the beginning of change is knowing. Knowing that you don't know what you should know, because that one honest assessment can serve as a springboard to help you get to your place of greater truth. And though it may be an uncomfortable truth, truth does not come, ladies and gentlemen, to beat us over the head with guilt or shame. Oh no. Truth comes to create awareness that empowers, informs, and transforms. However, we must be willing to put truth to work, turn our newfound awareness and knowledge into action. And sometimes the revelations are painful as we begin to peel back the layers, because some of what we discover about ourselves in the process oftentimes won't be pretty, just like this young lady. But the pain will pass, the dismay will fade, and we will be better for it. And this young woman, she may not have known who she was, but I knew what she believed about who she was, judging by her length of stay in that violence and her willingness to accept the violence. He had been beating her for years. She never took the time to develop an intimate relationship with herself. She had been suffering abuse for a long time. She had lost contact with the beautiful, intelligent, and important woman inside. With every fist and with every insult, she believed more and more that she was worthless. And life could get no better than this inferior one that she had become accustomed to living. So she stayed. But on that day in my office, she was awakened, and the gates toward her freedom flung wide open. But it was up to her to find the courage to walk through it. Ladies and gentlemen, are you guilty of exceeding your stay in a bad situation, in an inferior situation? It doesn't get any better, but you're terrified of letting go. But I challenge you to let go. And I also challenge you that before you step into your next relationship, let him or her find you already engaged in a committed, loving, and understanding relationship with yourself. Yes, with you. I intentionally took years of a sabbatical away from developing intimate relationships, and people thought I was crazy, bitter against men, or that I was a lesbian, or all the above. They could not conceive why a 21-year-old would choose such a path. But I knew I needed to come into real contact with who I was. You see, time after time, relationship after relationship, I had been giving myself, my body, my heart, my mind, and my time to men when I didn't even know what I was given, because I had not determined my value or my essence. I was floating aimlessly like a ship without a sail, and I had to come to a place in my life where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of the hurt, sick and tired of the self-ignorance, and sick and tired of being depleted. So I went on a mission to find me. I had spent far too much time looking for validation in the arms of a man. I needed to fall in love with Sharon Hollingsworth, with me. And eventually I did. And the thing about knowing who you are is that you find that your standards become elevated. Your perspective and even your posture changes. And you're no longer easily impressed by people, life, and circumstances. And it's not that you become hard-nosed, but rather more aware and more in tune because you have finally arrived. You realize your God-given power, strength, and significance. And as a result, you don't tolerate abuse or inferiority. Oftentimes, we have the audacity to have greater expectations of others in regards to their treatment of us, when in reality, it's us who set the tone for how others are to treat us. But sometimes we fail to do this. And as a result, we accept whatever and wonder why. And for some of us, our inner cores are screaming out, "Hello, I'm in here. Spend some time with me. Get to know me. Come on now. Don't you love me?" Every time I want to spend some intimate time alone with you, you go out and get busy. Find someone else to hang out with or play with those little buttons on your phone. What about me? Aren't I worth getting to know? Some of us have grown so immune to self-neglect because we're so disconnected from ourselves. Our inner core is on mute because it done gave up. This heifer can't hear me, is what it's saying. It's calling some of you men heifers too. I'm just kidding. But the reason why some people hunger for outside validation is because they have yet to learn self-validation. And it's easy to answer to an inferior life, to an inferior name, when you don't know what your true value is and don't truly know who you are. And it's impossible to get to know who you are if you're always in a crowd. And for some of us, even when we're alone, we're still in a crowd because our minds are so crowded with worries about life, work, children, and circumstances, and about what people think of us, and about our families, and talking on the phone all day, having endless to-do lists. What am I cooking for dinner? And the list goes on and on and on, and watching mindless television. I know because I was one of these people. There is constant chatter in our internal and external environments that we seem to never turn off. But we must be willing to be silent, be still, be alone, and ask ourselves some tough questions, starting with, who am I really? Who am I underneath the skin when no one's watching? When the curtains are drawn and no one else is at home, when it's just me standing alone in the presence of God, where there can be no pretense. Who am I really? Who am I then? Ask yourself the question. Ladies and gentlemen, we educate others on how they are to treat us. We provide them with the lesson. But if we, the scholars of our own lives, have never been schooled, never invested in self-education, then how can we develop the expertise of self and impart that lesson onto others? Let me put it another way. How can a teacher effectively teach on a subject that he or she has never been a student of? In case you missed it, you're the subject. For those of you who may not know, I'm a recording spoken word artist and debuted my first CD project called Not Another Tear, Moving from Pain to Purpose. And there's 4 really great singers on the project lending their voices to it. And there's a poem on this project and it's titled, They Call, But I Don't Answer. And the last line asks a very simple question. What are they calling you? And do you dare answer? So think about that. Someone called me the infamous B word once, and a couple of people heard it, and they were very eager to come and tell me. On a side note, you've got to watch some fire starters because every sincere act isn't always sincere. So with a smile on my face, I responded, "Child, that is not my name. They couldn't have been talking about me." You see, had I not known my essence by this time, it would have angered me and hurt my feelings. But that's not my reality anymore, ladies and gentlemen. What's your reality? Lamont answered to an inferior name, and he shouldn't have. I answered to birthdays that were never mine and to name calling. You see, they said that I was destined for failure because of where I came from. And for a long time, I believed it. And for 8 long years, I was bullied all throughout elementary and middle school, rejected by my peers, and then later rejected by those who were supposed to love me. Fragmented and broken, I answered to a life that was inferior to my calling. And I had to learn that I shouldn't have. My former client answered to abuse, shame, and pain, and to a life that was inferior to her calling. And she shouldn't have. Ladies and gentlemen, what are they calling you? And do you dare answer to those things that are inferior to your calling? Stop subjecting yourself to circumstances, to situations, to a life, and to people that are inferior to why you showed up here on this planet. In the pursuit of your destiny, the first order of business is you must first know your name. And your name is purpose.